Prime Minister Mark Carney accompanied King Charles on his first day of a royal visit to Canada, stopping at Lansdowne Park here in Ottawa.
So it's a good day for Canada.
It's not raining.
It's not raining, the sun is shining, the future is bright, the land is strong.
Carney joined King Charles and Queen Camilla at both of their public appearances today, where they greeted onlookers. Tomorrow, the King will deliver the government's speech from the throne, after which Prime Minister Mark Carney will begin to deliver on his promises, and he promises to do that at breakneck speed.
We are going to be very, very busy in the next few weeks. But we are going to be very, very busy in the next few months. We are going to be very, very busy in the next few years. We're going to have to do things previously thought impossible at speeds not seen in generations.
Carney's caucus indicated they have faith Carney will fulfill his agenda, as yesterday they voted not to adopt the power to turf him as Liberal leader, if necessary. We're going to talk about all of that with the Power Panel. Emily Nicola is a columnist for Le Devoir. Brad Levine is a former national campaign director for the NDP. And here with me in the studio, Vandana Cotter, who is an advisor to former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and Ginny Roth is a former Conservative campaign strategist. It's good to see you all. Happy Monday. Happy King's Speech Eve. Is that a thing? We're going to make it a thing. Vandana, the King, the Queen, they're here. What's your expectation for what we're going to hear from King Charles tomorrow when he delivers that speech? Is it going to be a longer version of the mandate letter, or are we going to have some more surprises, do you think?
I think you'll see a lot of recurring themes. I mean, we've talked about the things in the mandate letter, themes that also Mr. Carney has already shared in terms of building Canada, connecting with our allies, Canada's role in the world. And I think really what the King's presence here is more than just that we have a sovereign, but also that Canada is more than just not U.S., that we have a strong relationship with our allies, that we are part of the Commonwealth, we are part of the Francophonie. There's a number of places in the world that Canada belongs to and can use that to their advantage. And I think a lot of people felt that when everything was happening with Donald Trump, that Canada, they weren't sure where Canada would land. And I think that we've been proven that Canada has a lot of allies and friends, and we have a lot of resources that we can also support and people who want to do business with us.
Ginny, it is the first time the sitting monarch has opened Parliament since 1977. I think maybe I'm the only one who was alive then. I was going to see Star Wars because I was 4 as the year it came out. What do you expect to hear tomorrow? There's the agenda and then there's the articulation of sovereignty. Do you think we'll see anything significant from the King on that?
I'll just say I really appreciate the symbolism. I think it's meaningful and important at any time, really. I'm glad it's happening, so I'm for it. But I think Canadians very quickly will move into a what have you done for me lately mode. And if I'm the government, I want the speech to signal where the rubber hits the road on affordability, on public safety and crime, which I think is a huge concern from the public that we haven't heard much from the government on. There's some gestures. I want to hear about immigration coming under control, all sorts of subject matters that many people who lent Carney and the Liberals their vote expect movement on. And I think so far the government seems to indicate they kind of get that. But I think for the sake of the government and the Liberals and their longevity, they would do well to pivot from symbolism to action rather quickly.
Right. Well, Brad, what do you expect to see? I mean, Wab Kinew was here earlier in the show, and the Premier of Manitoba made it pretty clear that he expects to see some concrete movement on something, at least directionally, on some of the big projects and some of the things by as early as next week when they get together in Saskatoon. So what are you expecting to hear tomorrow?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we should be expecting a lot of what the Prime Minister has been signaling already. I think it's going to be more general than maybe what Ginny is hoping for in terms of granularity. I can't imagine the King talking about grocery prices, but I wish he did. I hope he did, because that's a huge concern. I just don't see it. So while I want it, I don't expect it.
You want him to go after Galen Weston directly. That's what you want to see, right?
That's not the NDP want to see. That's right. That's right. And mention the Edmonton Oilers' chances of winning the Stanley Cup. But where I'll be looking to, and I think the big project stuff will be signaled for sure. But where I'll be most interested in hearing is how far the government is willing to go to have the King articulate the muscularity of Canada's sovereignty. To Vandana's point, I think that's right about Canada having allies around the world, that we're not just a neighbor to the Americans, that we actually have trading partners that we wish to expand across the globe, that we are a part of the Commonwealth, that we're part of the Francophonie, that we have a role in the world to play that's beyond our client relationship with the Americans. But how far will he go to talk about Canada's sovereignty, whether not being the 51st state, whether being, our destiny is written by ourselves, not by the White House. How far will he permit the king to go? I think that'll be of great interest, and I think that will signal whether the throne speech is more than just symbolism and actually something more substantial.
Emily, what are you looking for tomorrow when this all gets going?
I think you have strong clues in a mandate letter. The mandate letter, however, is very short. And so it's an opportunity to have that as basically your skeleton and expand on it. It just so happens that the issue of affirming Canada's sovereignty and national security is part of the objectives of the government. And so you don't need to have the king go out of topic to make his own personal, if he actually articulates what the government wants to do in terms of protecting Canadian sovereignty, and he just happens to be the person delivering the speech, you already have that image of the king speaking to Canadian sovereignty. I also think that, if there is some sort of laïus, or obviously it's going to be scripted, but some sort of more of a personal statement before the throne speech, that speaks to his personal attachment to Canada, you already have in and of itself an affirmation of the relationship between Canada and the United Kingdom, and the fact that the king is going to be there for Canada. You already have that, and I expect something of the sort, because the thing about the monarchy is that it doesn't need to be loud in and of itself. It's loud even though it hasn't necessarily opened its mouth yet. And so I think that's how royal power tends to work. And I think we're going to be saying things in which everybody understands what it means, but you don't need to be saying much because of just the statement and the symbol in and of itself. Before I let others speak, I just also want to mention that there's been quite a few debates at least internally, also that has been shared with media in terms of what it means for the United Kingdom to have the king that wears the crown of Canada as well as the crown of the UK to be here making a speech in the context of the relationship with Donald Trump. There's things that the king cannot say directly, also because it would seem as if he's speaking with the other crown rather than the crown that he's wearing while in Canada, which is the crown of Canada. And so because you have basically this conflict of interest of some sort, it needs to be implicit, but in ways that Donald Trump perfectly understands. And I think with Mark Carney at the White House, we've seen indications of how this government is able to send messages that are really clear with speaking few words. And I expect that's the tone we're going to see tomorrow as well.
Well, this is what I wonder about, Vandana. Like, is the event alone enough? That's right. Like, there's a lot of diplomacy that happens, that is at a level that only kind of dogs can hear. Like the maple leaf brooch and the Canadian medal, and it's all heraldry-based things that royal experts understand. I'm not sure most people get, but you do have the king unable to act without the advice of the prime minister. In this case, there's two pretty significant prime ministers in his ear. Is it just the event alone, rather than trying to do it to have him say something significant? Because they're trying to manage this relationship with Trump and with the UK and not upset either one of them.
I think the fact that he's here is a huge opportunity, something that people remember for years to come. I don't, as you mentioned, the province hasn't come since 1977, so I think that's huge symbolism. I also think you're talking to audiences. For the first time, I don't think people internationally would have listened to our speech from the throne. And now I think people in the UK, people around the world, people in the US will see that and just think about the power behind Canada and what Canada means and the relationships that Canada has around the world. And I think to Canadians, just reminding them that we are not alone. I think even some Canadians felt that they had doubt of could we stand up to Donald Trump? Could we survive tariffs? And I think that symbolism to Canadians as well helps them understand that, what, actually, yeah, we have a lot of power behind us. We have, not only do we have business opportunities and allies, but I think, In the past, I always wasn't sure how many Canadians were in tune with our international trips, and anytime we went to G7s or NATO's, I wasn't sure how many Canadians would listen to it. I think now people are listening, and they're interested in where Mr. Carney goes around the world, who he's speaking to, what comes out of that, especially if the U.S. pulls away from our traditional institutions.
But you know, Ginny, when the 51st state stuff was at its peak, people rallied around the flag. They didn't rally around the crown. You know what I mean? And I just wonder, are Canadians really looking for something out of this tomorrow that or are they not?
Yeah, I mean, to get to your earlier question, Prime Minister Starmer is building a relationship with Donald Trump in the interest of the United Kingdom. And that is, I'm sure, top of mind for the King. And Canada is trying to build its own relationship with the U.S. And it is trying to build its relationship with the U.S. I mean, the tone has really shifted from elbows up, we don't need the U.S., maybe we don't need a relationship at all with the U.S. anymore, which is something the Prime Minister said not very long ago, to flying to D.C., trying to, complimenting the President, getting on a positive footing with the President. And I think that's fine. Like, Canadians didn't know, I think, what they wanted. They wanted to both stand up to the U.S. and also to get to a place of stability. And I think deep down, Canadians realize we're not going to have stability without a strong trading relationship with the U.S., a market 10 times our size. I hope we get to that place of realism soon, and that we start negotiating that agreement again, just as the UK has assertively attempted to negotiate a deal with the US as well. And again, the symbolism is welcome, but I think Canadians are going to start to put a bit of a timeline on the government for delivery. It's still early. We're still in a honeymoon phase. I think every new government is sort of entitled to a bit of a honeymoon. But on this major project stuff, I mean, you see Premier Eby in BC really struggling to actually deliver, actually get the legislative framework in place to deliver on some of these major projects. And I think the government should be concerned, a government without a chief of staff, without many chiefs of staff for its new ministers, putting off budgets until the fall. I mean, that does not sound to me like a government that's ready to hit the road.
Yeah, the political currents are moving a whole lot faster than the HR processes. I think that is fair to say.
Let's see.
But, the criticism I've noticed of the shift away from the elbows up thing, with 51st state done, from the U.S. ambassador and the president saying that, like, the elbows can come down slightly, can they not? And you can sort of get back to what passes for more normal.
The way the Prime Minister was talking very recently was like, this relationship is over forever and totally irredeemable. And suddenly it's, now look, I'm glad our relationship is back on the table and that we're having a more realist conversation. I think, and at the end of the day, voters don't care about hypocrisy, so we don't need to dwell on it. But it's pretty hypocritical. I care, David.
Sure, but Brad, I don't know. Like, I'm of two minds of this. Like, yeah, like, obviously it got used in a campaign for political purposes, no question. But, at the time, Donald Trump was talking about using economic pain, and economic coercion.
They're still saying stuff like that all the time.
Well, Ambassador Hoekstra was on with Catherine Cullen on the House on Saturday, and he said multiple times the 51st state is over. And the president says he still thinks it's a good idea, but not an objective.
But there were representatives of the U.S. saying that from the minute Trump was elected all the way through the election, they were always speaking out of both sides of their mouth, and that continues.
Okay, but Brad, how do you see it? Like, the U.S. has, in my view, rhetorically backed away from this a little bit. The ambassador is trying to make it very clear the 51st state stuff is done, and let's sort of like move on from that. I mean, where do you think it stands in terms of what happens tomorrow, whether there needs to be something there?
Yeah, well, it's not only what happens tomorrow, but what happens at the First Ministers' meeting in Saskatoon, maybe a precursor to what could be set up for the G7 that's taking place in Kananaskis, Alberta, shortly thereafter. So you can see all these events maybe being in a sequence as to the story. But I mean, the elbows up, was a very effective rallying cry for a certain time at a time when we were in a federal election, and that's where rhetoric, always takes a heightened tone, and people get, caught up in that moment.
Okay, Brad, I was going to interrupt you for just one second because King Charles is meeting with Cindy Woodhouse-Neepanak, the National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations. So I just wanted to show this to Canadians. This is happening at Rideau Hall. Okay, and there they are. They're sitting down. We saw that with Natan Obed from the ITK earlier, and we expect him to also meet with Métis National Council President Victoria Pruden. So this is just a picture of a sit-down. So Brad, as you were, we just wanted to show what's happening with the head of state.
The king can interrupt.
Yeah, I mean, it's a royal prerogative, I believe.
We get interrupted by the Prime Minister, by the King, fine.
Yeah.
No, to the point, though, elbows up during the campaign. Listen, as the kind of the engagement between the two countries evolves, you can't be elbows up all the time. What you have to do is meet the moment. Where I think, though, that the undercurrent, where maybe it's not top of mind, elbows up, booing the American anthem at the Oilers game, but what I think, and this is a tee up, and again, this is what I'll be looking for tomorrow, and again at the meeting with the premiers in Saskatoon, and that is turning to remind Canadians, look, we were vulnerable, where the President of the United States was rhetorically suggesting that he could do tremendous economic advantage in order to take us over. Let's not forget that. So maybe it's not top of mind front page news, but it's certainly underneath. And we're still losing jobs with the tariffs. Auto sector in central Canada, very nervous. Forestry sector. There's a number of the arts and entertainment sector, the film and television sector. There are many, many people who are feeling vulnerable, even though it's not front and center. So what then do we do? What is the revised elbows up? Well, instead of elbows up looking to the south, we're actually looking inward, bringing that Team Canada approach to say, what do we need to get done? Big projects, sure. So let's talk about resource extraction, energy, LNG projects, energy corridor. All of those things should be on the table in an effort to say, let us never be as vulnerable as we found ourselves in February of 2025 when the President of the United States said that he could economically take us over. So I think the discussion is going inward, and it's what we need to do quickly and powerfully internally for the domestic audience. I think that's the new elbows up.
Right. Well, look, I have an interview with the Prime Minister tomorrow that will air here at 5 o'clock Eastern Time on Power and Politics, so I can promise you Canada-U.S. will be a part of that conversation. Emily, I mean, what do you make of this shift in position from the Prime Minister in advance? Is it a shift in position? Is it an evolution now that the 51st state thing has died down, that they can go to this more cautious, business-like approach with the U.S., or is it hypocrisy, as Ginny suggests?
It's not necessarily hypocrisy, it's just volatility. Donald Trump is unpredictable, and right now he's focusing on bullying other people than ourselves. It doesn't mean that he's not a bully anymore. And every time that you have an abusing relationship with anyone, there's going to be those moments of basically calm, where you feel like, oh, maybe this is over. And those moments of calms are part of the reason why you stay and get abused again. And so I think we need to not just follow the words and what the ambassador said, but also, as was just said, as Brad was just saying, follow whether or not Donald Trump is still interested in destructing the auto sector in Ontario. The answer is still yes. It doesn't matter what he says in terms of 51st state. 51st state was always going to be through economic destruction in Canada. And if he's intended on repatriating all the industry in the U.S., you still have that going on. And the fact that we don't know what's next is already creating some instability in terms of people's ability to invest, and we see some companies being a little bit more hesitant before setting shop in Canada. We already see that, and so the context has a change. And I think if Donald Trump mood changes, or if the poll swings differently in the U.S., or if there's the midterms coming and that puts him under pressure and he's switching strategy again, we need to not be surprised, because what we have is an unstable man. And periods where he feels better is part of the instability. And so I agree that basically the throne speech and the mandate letter and what Canada has been doing in terms of trying to have a sense of we need to build our sovereignty, including our economic sovereignty, remains the order of the day. And it's not because there's this change of tone from the ambassador in Ottawa that people should be switching their vacation plans either. That boycott, I think that maybe we should travel elsewhere. I think we want to keep that energy, especially if it comes with the other option, which is buying Canadian and traveling within Canada as well. That's always good.
Okay, no, good points. Ginny, I want to start with you on sort of the next topic I want to pivot to, because it's about the Reform Act, and the Conservatives, they implement it. They've been enthusiastic supporters and users of the Reform Act. The Liberals decided not to, which is interesting, because I spoke with Stephen McKinnon earlier, the House Leader, about this. And there is some frustration inside the Liberal caucus that they didn't adopt it. Not that there's a coup going on against Mark Carney, but people who were frustrated when it took a long time to get Justin Trudeau to the point of departure. What do you make of this decision by the Liberal caucus not to go down the road the Conservatives have gone?
Yeah, I was surprised by the number of Liberals I talked to today who were disappointed by that, just like average party members and people around Ottawa. And I think it's because of the same reason that Michael Chong originally presented the Reform Act, I think, the sort of intent of bringing Canada's democratic systems closer to a model where members of parliament are more empowered to make decisions and there's not so much power vested in leaders of parties. I am of a mixed mind on it myself, but certainly seems to be that that's where we want to move. The Conservative caucus, yes, they used it, but I actually think increasingly Conservative MPs just think that should be the role of MPs in our parliament. Clearly, some Liberal MPs feel that way as well. There's been some reporting that some of them would have voted to or did vote to support the Reform Act, but not enough of them. And that could be a challenge in the future for the Liberals, and they don't need to look far to know what that challenge looks like. All they have to do is look to late last year when very clearly a majority of Liberal MPs, had they had a secret ballot, would have or the number required to depose their leader. And so it's a shame. I mean, I think they probably just didn't want the news stories that they didn't have faith in Mark Carney, even though that would be a simplistic read of the situation.
Yeah, so Vandana, what I was told is the vote in caucus, it went to a recount of the secret ballot just to make sure, I guess, which suggests to me, I obviously don't know the numbers, that it was close. I mean, no way asking this to suggest Mark Carney's leadership is in trouble, you know? It would be foolish to suggest such a thing. But structurally, not giving yourself this power as a caucus, what do you make of this decision after everything we talked about last fall?
I think it depends what your history is as a member of parliament. So if you're a grassroots organizer, when I voted for Gerard Kennedy, I was just a member. I was a volunteer. I didn't there's a number of people who make those decisions. And if you're someone who has organized, if you're someone who respects that sign person who's up every week to put your signs down, and people who actually, put their names forward and do the work to pick that leader, then chances are you might be like, well, we can ourselves make that decision, right? And I think it depends how you look at it. And I agree, I would have been disappointed with that decision only because I know what it's like to be just a volunteer in the middle of riding who no one really knows and have that power taken away. And I don't think that's fair. I think I understand where some people feel that just for what happened with Justin Trudeau, or they feel like the caucus should be more empowered. And I understand that because if you're not a minister, if you're not a PS, you don't know always where you fit in. Some caucus members have their own projects and others just don't know where their voices. And in caucus, that's where their voices really come to fruition, where they can share things. So maybe they want to put that forward. So I can see that just given how the wide extent of the caucus members, knowing the different people there, how they would feel. But I think it landed ultimately where it's supposed to be. But I don't think it has anything to do with Mr. Carney. I think it has to do with how people feel just about the role of caucus members in these situations.
Brad, it does seem though that, members of parliament, there's only 343 of them in the country at any given time, but they can be very neutered in terms of their ability to change things inside their own political party. Once you get here, if you're not a cabinet minister, if you don't have the prominence of a Chrystia Freeland to resign on fall economic statement day, right? So there was that frustration of the letter writing campaigns of last fall, and I guess the other extreme is what we saw in the United Kingdom, where the, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak sort of revolving door kind of forced by the caucus. I mean, what do you make of this move by the Liberals, and what is the role of the parliamentary caucus in sort of getting rid of an unpopular leader or dealing with leadership questions?
Yeah. Well, and it's also the case not just in the UK, but in Australia too. The Labour Party has gone through multiple spills, as they call it, down there, where they can remove it within.
They're always tossing someone out on Australia, it seems.
That's right, yeah. And it's a very faction-based party there. I think maybe less so in Canada. If you lose a big chunk of your caucus, and I think Trudeau maybe... we always point to the Trudeau thing but were there enough Liberal MPs who had the guts to stand up and say it? We don't know. I mean, it didn't meet the threshold that Michael Chong's does. There's a formula for it. But I know that my time on Parliament Hill, I was there for just under a decade. If you lose the will of, if the leader loses caucus, it makes life incredibly difficult. I don't know how Trudeau did it for all those months. The writing was clearly on the wall. He lost the public. He lost, much of his caucus. I don't know what the grassroots were saying at the time. There was no evidence to suggest that they were polled in any kind of way. But nonetheless, I know from my experience that if you lose a big chunk of your caucus, you're toast anyways. Eventually, it's going to come and get you. So then the question becomes, is your party leader chosen by the grassroots in the case of the Liberal Party and the New Democratic Party and I guess the Conservative Party. If the leader is the party leader and also simultaneously the leader within the parliamentary caucus, who ultimately gets to trigger the downfall? Are you a grassroots party, or are you more, I would suggest maybe a more kind of elite where just a small group of people? Why wouldn't it be the federal council, like in the Democratic Party's thing? Which group does it? We get to see the MPs all the time. You cover the MPs; they get to vote. They're very important people, no question about it. But they're one part of of the party's apparatus in selecting it. So we always kind of default that the party leader starts and stops his or her leadership with the caucus, where it's not the case at all. It's actually they're the leader of the party overall, which is why for other parties we have other vehicles to call back the leader, challenge the leader's standing, or select them in that case. So there's lots of different ways of going about it, but it just I think concentrates that power. But you don't need the Michael Chong formula in order to have a leader who's perpetually consumed with delighting their caucus. And, I do from my own experience, and that was something that, Jack Layton's father, who was chair for Brian Mulroney's caucus, and of course Jack himself in the NDP, every day. It was always caucus, because when you've got the caucus on your side, you can do many things. But when you are fighting within yourselves, within caucus, you can't do much. And that, I think, should be the guardrails.
Yeah, I don't want to relitigate the Trudeau thing, but he kind of had lost the voters, and the caucus responding to the loss of the voters had no way to sort of force the issue. That's where he kind of ended up. They still personally were loyal, a lot of them, and quite liked him. Emily, they decided not to go down this path. Maybe it's because the political context is completely different. What are your thoughts on what the Liberals decided here?
It makes me think of the electoral reform dilemma, in the sense that people always consider it, and then when the parties come to power without it, they're like, why? We don't need it. The thing with the Liberals is that they got rid of their leader without the Reform Act. So why do they need the Reform Act? It's as simple as that. It's also that because they don't have the Reform Act, it gave power to the cabinet, actually, to play a huge role in selecting the succession of Justin Trudeau. You saw the lineup of ministers rallying behind Mark Carney. And so the people who were in the PMO and the people who were close to Justin Trudeau played a role in skewing the race in the direction of Mark Carney. And you didn't have a lot of MPs who are not well known by the public playing a huge role in terms of how the leadership race was set up. And so it gives people within the establishment, the current system, a lot of people, even in times of crisis, to just select what's going on next. And so it suits them. And there's a lot of new MPs as well who don't necessarily want to start their day in Parliament by saying, I don't want to be a good trooper. And so I think that also influenced the vote. And then there's the people who have been selected in cabinet this time around. They don't want to also ruffle the feather of Mark Carney. And then there's the people who were not selected in cabinet, who are maybe a little bit sour that have voted for the Reform Act. But I think that there's people taking notes in terms of who voted for that, and people have a long memory in terms of this is a person who doesn't like to just be a loyal trooper, to use that vocabulary again. And so there's a political cost to voting a certain direction with this. And so we're back to the square one in terms of the culture of the Liberal Party that is very much centralized. It's just that people are happy with the center for the time being, and we'll see next time there's a crisis.
Well, I'm going to give you the last word on this, but it's the next time there's a crisis, but it was extinction level event facing the Liberal Party until the change of Mark Carney came in, and I think that a lot of new MPs in particular might say, I don't know if I want to vote for a policy to turf this guy when he kind of is largely responsible for maybe saving the party.
Yeah, largely, I obviously disagree that there's the same establishment. I think there's a lot of new people that were behind Mark Carney on the campaign. There are people I've never seen before who are on the campaign.
Well, the PMO at the end of the Trudeau years stayed out of it.
Sure.
A lot of the PMO at the beginning of the Trudeau years did end up supporting Mark Carney.
Sure.
Right? Case in point.
Yeah, sure. But I will say, from the caucus perspective, I spoke to a lot of caucus members who had that direct conversation with Mr. Carney. So I do think think there is enough affinity with him to give him a chance. And that, to Emily's point, that you don't need this. At the end of the day, Justin Trudeau did step down. Maybe at not the time they wanted to, but at the end of the day, and then they get to form the government now. So I think at the end of the day, you don't need that. And there's going to be a lot of caucus members who feel different ways about it. But at the end of the day, I really think it's because they want to rally behind the Prime Minister and they have other ways to engage with these issues.